Alright, it's been quite a journey. But let's get the music starting up. I think Journey will do us very good here. And let's talk about the other missions in Command & Conquer. The Covert Operations missions, the console missions, the fun park missions, all of it. Alright, now, I haven't really, stated a whole lot about this, but the other tier lists we've done here. But it's worth noting that I'm basically very much rating these missions as they were basically available to me. So these missions are basically ones I basically played after the main campaigns for GDI and NOD. And this will also be after looking for a skirmish mode and stuff like that back in the day. And this is really important. So I want to note that basically Command & Conquer Tiberian Dawn, the original Command & Conquer, it didn't actually have a player versus AI type of gameplay mode for it, as opposed to Red Alert basically did. So that basically colors way opinion basically some of these missions here, because some of these Covert Operation missions were the only way you can actually get access to the full tech trees for GDI and NOD. And that's very much the case for a lot of these Covert Ops based missions and how I basically look at them. So keep that sort of in mind. And just starting out here, GDI Blackout. So GDI Blackout, for those who don't know, is basically a mission where you have two commandos for GDI. Your task is basically to blow up some power plants that are basically guarded by a flame tank. To basically blow up the flame tank, if you take an airstrike to it, which is nice, you get airstrikes early on. And once you take off the power plants, you basically have to move your NCV into the base area, or into the main play area, so to speak. After that, it's basically very typical build and conquer type of mission where you build up a base full arsenal at your disposal, not as their base, full arsenal at their disposal, and you just duke it out. And as I basically sort of point out here, because there's no skirmish mode basically in Command & Conquer, you don't get a whole lot of access to your tech tree. And this is a very good mission to sort of get your feet wet with mixing around all the units and stuff like that for GDI, and as well as see what NOD basically offers as well. Another mission itself is not that hard, but it's an excellent mission nonetheless, so we'll throw that one in excellent. And by the way, it's worth noting that a lot of these Covert Operation missions and even the console ones, I have a very extremist view of them for the most part, because a lot of them are really great, and a lot of them are not really great at all. But you know what they're all like, so we'll just get to them as we go to them. Alright, so the next one is Hell's Fury. So Hell's Fury is basically a mission where there's a temple NOD in the upper right corner of the map, and it's basically a NOD base basically in the top center. Over in the top left is basically another small little Command & Conquer NOD base, and this particular stuff for these bases basically has it so you probably want to take out the middle one basically first, take out the construction yard basically second, and then move over to take out the temple NOD after that. Now, Hell's Fury is basically known for being the mission that's very hard, because there's basically timed nuclear strikes in this one, and unlike basically a lot of other missions where you play against NOD, these nuclear missiles keep being fired repeatedly at you. So you're probably going to face a whole lot of nuclear strikes based in this mission against yourself. A lot of players find this really difficult to deal with. I don't really find it that difficult to deal with, but it's kind of annoying nonetheless. Also worth noting is the fact that the NOD bases basically have a whole lot of obelisks basically in them. I think there's a total of 10 obelisks of light basically on this mission to basically fight. And they basically pose a huge challenge basically to get through their base defenses to NOD forces, so getting to the temple NOD destroyed so it doesn't launch any more missiles at you is quite a hassle to say the least. In my mind, this is a fairly fantastic mission basically play, because you actually have fairly good luck basically going up basically to attack these these bases, and hopefully the missile strikes will not completely throw you out of the game. But there's always that possibility that could screw you up those missiles, where they could take out your cannon yard and that's basically it for you. NOD doesn't really attack that much besides that, but whatever. I found this to be a fairly admirable mission, so I'll just throw it right there myself. Alright, GDI Infiltrated. So GDI Infiltrated is basically a mission where you start off with a bunch of NOD engineers inside your GDI base, and a bunch of other NOD forces basically attacking you. And your goal here is basically to sort of thwart the Nod attack basically on your forces. Now, for the most part, what's really interesting about this mission is that you basically have to deal with the fact that, like, you know, Nod's gonna be like building structures inside your base. And at the same time, you also have to deal with the fact that, like, you know, they're attacking you basically from the get-go. But once you basically reassert yourself in, like, this game, it's basically like a very typical, like, you know, you fight against their forces, they fight against yours type of mindset. But what's really interesting about this mission, after basically, like, you know, you deal with the initial threat, Nod basically throws, like, you know, a massive amount of, like, forces basically to attack you. They don't have access to nukes in this one, so it's basically just like the units coming at you, but they throw a lot of units basically at you to fight, so to speak. The goal is basically to deal with, like, you know, a non-stop, like, you know, their forces all at once basically when they attack you, so it's a very difficult mission to say the least. And I quite like that quite a bit as well. In my mind, this is actually a fantastic mission because it basically demonstrates what it'd be like if, like, the AI is basically capturing your building with engineers and engineer rushes. And on top of that, you basically have to deal with, like, you know, a massive amount of, like, you know, Nod units basically coming to attack you as well. And of course, once you basically deal with, like, you know, those Nod forces, like, you know, in their harvesters and stuff like that, you just have to attack their base. The base isn't anything special, but, you know, after the onslaught of like, units basically attacked with, it's fine, I think, because, you know, the real chance of basically surviving, like, the onslaught for the most part, not really, like, you know, throwing, like, you know, Nod out of, like, the map, so to speak. So there's that. Alright, GDI Elemental Imperative. Now, GDI Elemental Imperative is basically a mission where you have to basically rescue Mobius from, like, the UMP summit. It's basically a mission where you have to basically, like, you know, run around the map, basically, like, you know, clearing out, like, you know, Nod forces basically attacking civilians in the local area, and then making your way up to, like, the peace summit to basically rescue them, you know, from up there. After you rescue the, like, scientists to basically get to an evac point, there's gonna be, like, a Nod, like, you know, flame tank rush basically come to, like, you know, stop your attempt basically to evacuate. But what can I say basically outside of that, I guess? So, I want to let the basically with, like, you know, the sort of, like, commando type missions for Command & Conquer's, like, you know, Covert Operation missions. I really don't think much of them because it's really hard to sort of, like, you know, determine what you're supposed to be doing. There's no, like, you know, review of, like, the map anywhere when you basically, like, play these missions, so it's really hard to sort of, like, you know, peg what you're supposed to do for the most part. And that basically, like, you know, sort of, like, you know, dampens the mission a little bit for me. Outside of that, I think it would be, like, a cool mission. Like, you know, basically you have to, like, you know, get up to, like, the peace summit, rescue them, and get out in, like, a heck retreat. But because, like, the fact that they have, like, you know, a very, like, you know, sort of lackluster show and tell of, like, you know, how to basically play a mission, it comes out as being very mediocre, so there is that about it as well. Oh, you know what? I just confused Elemental Imperative with Ground Zero here. So, basically that all, like, you know, corresponds to Ground Zero. Elemental Imperative is a little bit different. So, Elemental Imperative is basically a mission where there's, like, you know, a bunch of, like, you know, nuke crates you have to basically, like, you know, retrieve from Nod. And they basically have a bunch of Nod forces basically in the area that are, like, you know, far too powerful for you basically to defeat. So, the idea of this mission is you have to sort of, like, you know, weave your way basically through Nod forces basically to get to the crates. And, like, you know, relinquish them from, like, Nod control, so to speak. You don't necessarily know where, like, the crates basically are, but you do actually have a little bit of a hint. But there's basically this guy, like, at the start of the mission. He's going to help you basically, like, you know, find, like, you know, these crates if you basically go help his wife from, like, a prison and get her basically to safety. Now, much like, you know, the Ground Zero mission, though, Elemental Imperative is basically, like, you know, another mission is very, very mediocre because you're not really being told as to, like, you know, what you're basically supposed to do. He will eventually light up a flare, basically showing off where, like, the crates basically are after you rescue his wife. But trying to basically find his wife is a little bit more difficult to basically do, so it's basically another, like, sort of mediocre mission, so to speak. Alright, GDI Twist of Fate. So, GDI Twist of Fate is basically a mission where you have, like, you know, a couple, like, orcas on helipads, and it's followed, like, you know, outposts basically guarding of, like, you know, guard towers and such. And down from, like, the top of the map where you basically start with that guard tower to, like, the bottom, there's, like, a convoy of GDI units that are basically under assault by a Nod ambush. So, the idea of this mission is you have to basically survive the, like, Nod ambush, push back, like, the Nod forces, and when your NCV arrives, basically, like, deploy it to, like, you know, start your battle against the Nod forces in the area. Now, the gist of this mission is, like, you know, a very interesting one because, unlike with, like, you know, the other ones where, like, you know, you have, like, the airstrike to sort of work with, in this one, Nod has airstrikes against you. And you basically have to spend like the entire mission being bombed by like airstrikes to basically blow up the communication center that they're basically organizing them from. After you blow that up, it's basically just like 2 bases against your 1, so you have to deal with that as well. Overall, Twisted Fate is actually a very hard mission, but it's also a very rewarding one. So I'll say it's excellent, I think. Because it's nice basically to actually have like a sort of situation where you're a GDI player basically have to deal with airstrikes as opposed to the other way around. So we'll give that to basically like this one for that. Alright. We get to GDI Blindsided. So, GDI Blindsided is a mission where you have a commando, and your goal is basically to blow up a bunch of SAM sites on your side of the river. When you basically blow up these SAM sites, you'll basically get access to transport that will transfer your troops to your side of the river, and attack Nod's forces from the back. The thing about this mission though is that it's very difficult to basically do because as soon as you basically land on the other side of the river, Nod will basically spawn a bunch of vehicles basically to attack you, and they include surface to surface missile launchers, light tanks, flame tanks, the whole shebang basically deal with all at once. So I'm not really sure I can say this is a really great mission. It would be really good basically to have a mission where you get airstrikes from the get-go, because you do get airstrikes from the get-go, and you can basically bomb the Nod's base with them, as you see fit. But because of how difficult it is to get to your side, I can't say it's a very good mission. So I have to say that this one's terrible, I think. I did actually beat this mission by cheesing it, so to speak, but I feel it's a poor way of basically beating it, so there's that. So yeah, it's a terrible mission. Alright, now we get to the not Covert Operation missions, and they're a little bit different. Starting off with Bad Neighborhood. So, Bad Neighborhood is a mission where you basically start with a lone MCV, and your goal is basically to remain undetected from GDI's forces. To do this, you have to basically avoid the civilians that are basically in the area, because they'll basically alert GDI forces to your presence, and you have to basically avoid the GDI base of your units as well. Now, in some ways I basically like Bad Neighborhood because it's basically another good introduction missions to the campaign, but it also sort of shows that if you don't actually show off what your trigger is basically all about, it's very hard for the player to basically understand what you're basically supposed to do. I have played this mission both the GDI base getting alerted and not, and if you basically alert the base, it's very typical for GDI's basically throwing your units to basically attack you. You do throw your units back, but outside of that, if you basically stay undetected, so to speak, it's very possible you can basically cheese this mission by building a nuke and taking out every single one of their production structures all at once, so to speak. You can take out their barracks, their war factory, their construction yard all in one go with a nuke. So there's that to basically say about it. It's still a good mission basically to show off the full tech tree for Nod, but it could be better, is what I'll basically say about it. I think I'll say it's admirable because it's not a bad mission, it's not the greatest one to basically have for the Nod set here, so we'll throw it in admirable, I think. Alright, Deceit. Deceit. So, before I actually looked up how you can actually beat Deceit, it was basically a mission that I had no clue how to basically beat, so yeah. Right off the get-go we're gonna say this is a terrible mission, but let's explain why. So, the thing about Deceit is that you basically have to take your commandos in this mission to basically liberate a Nod base in the area, and you basically have to figure out how to sort of get into that base because there's guard towers basically around the perimeters of the base itself. Eventually you have a transport helicopter basically captured with engineers, and those transport helicopters will basically let you get into the base, and from there it's basically a very typical break out of the GDI defenses and then start harvesting and building up your forces to defeat GDI forces. Now, what's difficult with this mission is the fact that, the GDI basically gets an ion cannon to basically attack you with, and they also get access to, a very, interesting scripted, AI, which basically lets them build, units and, structures and everything else really fast. So, if you basically let the GDI, forces get activated and attack you that way, they're just gonna screw you, over, for sure. Now, how you can basically bait these missions by, like, avoiding triggers by assaulting a GDI base before a chance to basically build up, because their base is not pre-built. But again, that's basically sort of like cheesing it again, so I can't say it's a good mission, so yeah, it's into like the terrible missions for that reason. Alright, Eviction Notice. So, Eviction Notice is very similar to, like, Infiltrate for the GDI, like, map set, because it's another very hard mission. You basically start off with 7 flame tanks and NCV. And your goal is basically to wipe out a civilian town in the area, and use its, like, sort of space basically to develop your base from it. GDI has a very powerful presence in the area, but it's very much, like, hamstrung by the fact that, like, what can I say about it? So, it's very hamstrung, this mission, because GDI basically has, like, I guess it's advanced guard tower, or not advanced guard tower, their advanced communication center, in, like, a very easy position to basically attack it from. But they also have, like, a lot of advantages going for it as well, because they attack it with, like, massive forces in this mission, kind of, like, infiltrated, and they use a bunch of other stuff that's, like, kind of, like, decent as well. Like, they drop, I think, like, a Chinook with, like, engineers in your base at some point in the mission as well. Anyhow, Eviction Notice. We're gonna say that's an excellent mission because it's very, like, fun mission to play, so we'll throw it right there. Alright, Nod the Tiberium Strain. So, Nod the Tiberium Strain is very much another of those, like, command type missions where you basically have a squad of troops, and your goal is basically to, like, perform your objective. In this case, basically kill all the units basically in the map without killing any structures. So, I really like Tiberium Strain for, like, its, like, sort of thematic, like, outlook where you basically have to take your chem troopers and your flame tanks to basically, like, mop up everything in the vicinity. But I find it's, like, a very tedious mission because that's basically all you have basically going for you. Those, like, 2 type of units. So, while it's very thematic, this mission, it's also, like, a sort of, like, downright boring after a while as well. So, what can I say about it? It feels mediocre, and it pretty much is mediocre, so, yeah, mediocre. Alright, Cloak and Dagger. I want to say this right from the get-go that I really like Cloak and Dagger, but it's also a mission that, like, I didn't at first have a clue as to how to play, because it's very, like, difficult that MCV wants to basically rescue out of the base. So, for those who, like, need a background basically for this mission, Cloak and Dagger basically starts you off with a stealth tank and an MCV. The MCV has been captured, though, and it's basically inside a GDI base. You need to send your forces up to the GDI base with the stealth, or, your stealth tank up to the GDI base while avoiding all the enemy troops. Get into it and liberate your MCV. Now, I expected from the point of the developers, the idea is that after you basically rescue your MCV, you basically drive it out to, like, build up a base. But I've always found that, like, that's very difficult to basically do. So it's actually more ideal to actually sort of cheese it by building up your, like, base inside the GI base and, like, taking it apart from within. Now, if they actually, like, sort of, like, built this mission around that sort of concept, it would have been a pretty fun mission. But because they didn't, I can't really say it's, like, a great mission. So I'll say it's efficient because it's not, like, terrible as, like, the other ones, but it could be better if, like, they actually, like, sort of, like, leaned in toward, like, making you actually do that. So we'll say that a lot about as well. Alright, Not Hostile Takeover. Now, Not Hostile Takeover is basically a mission where GI and, like, you don't actually have access to, like, your full tech trees in this one. You're actually sort of limited to, like, not opposite lights, and they have access to, like, everything basically up to that point as well. Okay, it's not a very good explanation. I think this mission is basically one where you have, like, flame tanks and, like, the opposite light, but you don't have anything better than that basically on Nod's side. And GI basically has access to anything better than, like, basic stuff either for the most part. They have a couple, like, missile launchers, they have, like, MAV tanks basically to throw at you, but that's basically all they have going for them basically in this one. So what to say about this one? So I actually really like the idea of, like, hostile takeover because it sort of reminds me of, like, being, like, a mission which could have been, like, in a campaign itself. Basically it's sort of like an in-between between, like, Nod's, like, No Mercy mission and basically the one where we have to liberate, like, the stealth tank technology from, like, the bunker and stuff like that to get them. It could be, like, interesting mission if you look at it that way, but at the same time it's also very, like, kind of boring basically outside of that as well. I'll say it's admirable, but, you know, there could be, like, more bells and whistles to it to make it, like, you know, excellent or fantastic, I think, so we'll say that as well. Alright, Nod Under Siege. Or, if you basically played the original Command & Conquer, CNC Under Siege. So, Under Siege is basically that mission where you have a Nod base fully developed, but you have no money. And you have no Tiberium refinery, and you have, like, you know, harvesters at all here as well. The point of this map of its like mission is that basically like GI has you hemmed inside your base, and you have like forces on all sides basically ready to attack you. But they're holding off on doing so because they're going to send airstrikes to basically finish you off. Now, the thing about this mission is that, like, you know, it's a very cool idea because you have to sort of like puzzle your way out of like this situation, and then once you actually beat back like the GI forces, you basically have self their base and wipe them out. So, very fun. But I find that it could have been a lot more funner if, like, you know, maybe like the G actually like put up a fight after like you knock them out, or if they're a little bit more like, you know, active in the way it basically were. It's not a bad mission, but I think like Under Siege is basically a mission where it's like, you know, it's just excellent, and it's really not much I can say about, you know, more than that because it could have had more to it as well, but whatever. All right, the final like Covert missions is basically not Death Squad. So, not Death Squad is basically a mission where you have a small, like, you know, non-commando force, including commando. And your goal is basically to attack a GI base of an advanced communication center and try and figure out how to basically kill that advanced communication center without dying in the process. Now, this mission is very interesting because you basically have to sort of like figure out how to sort of like, you know, pick your way through like the GI forces and like get to like that advanced communication center. There's basically a couple ways you can basically try and do it. And there's like, you know, a proper way probably to do it and like a, you know, improper way, but, you know, as long as you kill the advanced communication center, it's basically all worth it. Anyways, this is probably the rare exception of like a Covert Operations mission where I'm going to say basically this one's like, you know, this excellent from the get-go. Or even fantastic. Yeah, I'll say fantastic. Because it basically sort of like, you know, melts into a lot of like the best things about like what Nod's basically all about. They tactfully enter like, you know, GDI territory. They do an objective, and they show how like badass basically are in doing so. So yeah, we'll say that's what we can about them. All right, so that's basically all the Covert Operation missions. Now we get into the console ones. Now, to give you some like, you know, background basically about the console missions, I only recently basically played these because they're basically part of the remastered version. I never actually played them on the PlayStation or like, you know, the Game Station or whatever like, you know, consoles they were basically on. But from what I can basically see, they weren't all that great anyways to begin with, so it's like, you know, whatever. So let's just get into them. Now, starting off with like GDI 97, Special Ops Mission 1. So this mission basically has you start off with a lone commando. And as you go through the map, doing like objectives for this commando, you'll basically get more and more units basically to play with. I found the opening mission to be kind of like, you know, annoying because just getting started on that mission was like, you know, very tedious. You could have like a flame tank decide to attack you. You could have like, you know, other issues happen as well. So not that great, but whatever. It's not a bad mission to start off with, but you know, it could have been better if they fixed this one. So we're just gonna avoid this one deficient because after basically like, you know, you get your forces basically on like, you know, en route basically to help you out. It's not a bad mission, but just getting it started was just like, you know, could have been better. Alright, GDI 97, like, you know, mission 2. That's basically the mission where you have to basically rescue Mobius, who's basically trapped in his hospital inside, like, you know, encroaching Tiberium and stuff like that. Not as their stuff basically around to basically try and stop you, but you're basically sending your forces basically to take them out before you have a chance to do anything. Now, this mission is kind of interesting because you start off with two divided, like, you know, GDI forces, and you have to basically sort of figure out how to basically get through the map and, like, you know, rescue Mobius with them. So it's very akin to, like, you know, some of like the non-campaign missions where you basically have to do it with them. But I found it to be sort of like, you know, kind of like, you know, a little easy basically to play because essentially like attacking like, you know, Nod forces from like the back the entire time. So you basically sending your forces in and there's like a couple like, you know, Nod power plants and you knock them out. You send them like in there's like a back of like the Nod base and you can knock it out that way. So that's basically sort of feel this mission is just keep knocking them out from the back. I don't think it's a bad mission. I feel like a very admirable one, but it could have been better, I think. So I'll say it's admirable, but it could have been better, I think. Alright, and then we got to GDI 97. Mission 3. So, Mission 3 is that mission where you basically start off with a small GDI force, but you don't have a whole lot of money to work with. And your goal here is basically to liberate a Nod base in the area, and use their funds basically to help your war effort against Nod forces in the area. This could have been a really interesting sort of reverse take on the Nod mission where you basically have to acquire the enemy's resources, but it really fails in one regard, in the fact that there's no construction yard or airstrip basically in the Nod base you're capturing. So it could have been better, but this one was basically a very mediocre mission to me because of that simple fact. So yeah, we'll just throw this basically over here, and that's where we're going to throw that one. Alright, so now we get to GDI 99, Spec Ops 1 and Spec Ops 2. So the first Spec Ops mission, let's see here. I'm trying to recall what these missions basically are, but I know that Spec Ops 1 was basically let's just look it up. So let's just see here, Spec Ops 1. Oh, okay, so this is the one where you basically sort of liberate a bunch of civilians where basically being experimented upon. They're basically inside this Nod base up here. So a very typical sort of intro mission basically, so to speak. You have a bunch of GF forces to sort of land on a beach, make their beachhead, build up a base, and basically assault Nod from their landing site. A really cool idea, I think, for a mission to start off with, but a little bit bland to say as well. The thing about this mission is that basically GF has their forces that they can work with, and they basically pound fairly well fortified Nod defenses. But after basically get past those defenses, they basically have to they basically have the advantage where you can basically kill the Nod construction yard without them being able to do anything. Not that I don't think they build stuff basically in these missions, the console ones, but it's worth pointing out that basically they have their construction yard basically right in front of them, so it's very easy to kill. I suppose in a way this is not a bad mission, but it could have been better, so we'll say this one's mediocre and just be done with it, I think. Alright, GDI 99 Spec Ops 2. So let's just quickly go back here. Alright, so Spec Ops 2 is basically a mission where you have to rescue your commando who's been captured by Nod forces. He's inside a prison and it's well fortified, to say the least. There's basically 3 Albas flanking his prison on all 3 sides. Outside of the fact that, of the prison being well fortified, there's also a base in the area, and that's got fortification as well. And then outside of the bases, the main base, they have a couple of additional bases as well to deal with. So basically, this mission has 2 supporting Nod bases that they basically go through, as well as a main Nod base that's basically guarding the prison, and then the prison itself, which is well fortified to begin with. I have to say this is probably one of the more excellent missions basically to play, because you basically have a lot basically sort of deal with. There's basically light tanks basically in the Tiberium fields. There's lots of potential for Nod bases to overwhelm you. It felt a little easy, I think, to say the least, but overall it's an excellent mission to sort of play with. So I'd say it's excellent to say that about it. All right, now we get to the Nod ones, and we start off with Nod 97 Spec Ops 01. I'm not really as familiar with the console mission, so forgive me for having to go through these and check them out. But it's just how it goes. All right, so I know what this one's basically all about. So 97 Special Ops 1 is basically a mission where you have to basically kill off a civilian town in the area. There's a GI force in the area as well, but they're not really much of an issue, to say the least. So this basically reminds me of the mission for Nod, where you have to basically kill the civilians who are basically in the area. But unlike with that one, where GI is basically also a threat, you also have to basically kill off the you just have to kill the civilians for the most part. So you don't have to really worry about GI in this one, which is kind of a nice little blessing, to say the least. It's a little bit quick, this mission, because there's really no threat from GDIs, to say the least. But Is there anything bad about it? I will say there's at least like one deficient part of it gets to say about it, because there isn't a whole lot of like difficulty bases, so to speak, in like, you know, getting to like the civilian town is wiping it out. So it's a little bit too simple in that sort of regard. Yeah, so basically like, you know, navigate your forces basically up to like the civilian town, take it out, and then like you win. So I think for like a, you know, a standalone mission like outside of the campaign, it's a little bit like, you know, deficient for that purpose. So yeah, we'll say that's deficient. Alright, here's like, you know, Spec Ops Mission 2. Alright, so 997 Spec Ops 2 is basically a mission that, like, you know, I wanted to enjoy quite a bit, but it came off as being like a little bit of a dud because of how it's sort of set up. The idea of this mission is that basically it's like very much a mirror of like, you know, new construction options where you have to basically capture a GDI like, you know, harvester area. And then like, you know, after you take out their harvesting operation, you have to basically kill off their main base. Now, the thing about this mission is that, like, you know, it's very possible to sort of, like, you know, cheese it by, like, you know, going up to the main base first and taking it out before you go off to, like, their, like, you know, harvester area. So it could have been a very fun mission, but because they don't really have, like, you know, the proper, like, sort of, like, you know, triggers basically going on here, I guess, or defenses to sort of stop you from abusing, like, you know, the AI and stuff like that, it sort of like came off as being, like, you know, a bit of a lacking sort of mission for that reason. I figured for that one inefficient as well because, yeah, the 997 missions were not that great and they're sufficient all around, I think. Alright, so now we get to Nod 99 and Nod Spec Ops 1 and 2 here. So the 99 console missions were a lot better than like the first ones. The first one basically has you with a commando trying to basically, you know, relinquish, like, not relinquish, but acquire basically some assets from GDI's base in like the area with a commando. And the ideas have to be sort of distracted, basically get them out of their base in order like to grab their stuff while they're basically out looking for you. The concept's pretty good for this mission, but is it a great mission? I'm not really sure. To give you some background about this mission, by the way, so basically the commando has like a force of like, you know, artillery, flame troopers, and like, you know, rocket troopers to sort of help them out. Basically the idea of like these are like, you know, units basically. They're basically supposed to like, you know, attack a civilian town in the area in order to sort of draw out the GI units. But I always found it like, you know, when you basically like draw out like the GI's units, they're not really like, you know, all that, like, you know, threatening basically to say the least. Basically the thing about like, you know, the first mission here is that it's very like possible to sort of like go up to their base, just like, you know, manually like just attacking like all their stuff basically outside of it. And then we basically like, you know, get to like a, you know, attacking their base itself. You could probably like just like, you know, drop right into it and just take out without like my shake shoe. I think the idea is that you're supposed to like, you know, go around to like, you know, the back of their base where there's basically a bunch of advanced power plants, take those out, and you can just like waltz right in with like, you know, without much notice. But yeah, it could have been better this one, I think. So it's not terrible, like it's not completely deficient, but it's mediocre to say the least. Alright. I will say that, like, you know, Spec Ops 2 for 99, console 99, that one's pretty good. And I think it's fantastic. So, Nod 99 Spec Ops 2 is basically has you against, like, you know, a GDI base in the area. And you basically have a bunch of comrades that have been, like, you know, captured by like, GDI forces. They can be, like, you know, there as well, but, you know, they're sort of, like, you know, meh, so don't worry about them. The idea of this mission is that GDI basically attacks you really, really hard. And you have to sort of like, you know, defend against these like massive attacks they're basically going to send to you. But you have a lot of options basically to make use of. There's a construction yard basically out in the open they can actually capture and like get access to GI tech. There's like ways to basically sort of go around and basically attack their like, you know, power plants for like the edges of the map. Lots of interesting sort of like ideas going on as well. They don't build anything in this mission, but you know, for how hard it basically is, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. So it's fine for like, you know, not being able to build a mission, you know, build anything for the AI. Alright, so that's all the console missions out of the way. Now we get to like the secret mission and the fun park missions. So for those who don't know, the secret mission is basically a mission where like you have like, you know, you're like variety of commandos, and they're a little bit pissed off. These commandos want to basically get revenge on their former employer, So they have access to like these special orcas they can actually use, and these orcas are basically like fire like obviously light type weaponry at like enemies. So there's basically that going for them. I can't really say the secret mission basically is anything more than like fun little like excursion to say the least. It does what it does, but I can't really say it's like anything special. So I was gonna say deficient. It's not terrible because they're just messing around, the developers of this mission. I don't think it's like it was actually meant to be like a real mission, but whatever. Deficient. All right, the Dial missions. So the Fun Park missions are all about like combating a bunch of like prehistoric like critters, so to speak. You have your T-Rexes, you have like your like Stegosauruses, Triceratops, and like all other stuff basically coming at you. There's some really interesting ideas with like the Fun Park, but I think there's like sort of like a bit met in some places as well. The first mission for Fun Park 01 is like just terrible. For example, the first Fun Park mission basically has you like dealing with a bunch of dinosaurs basically on the map, but there's basically just like a T-Rex here, a Stegosaurus there. There's nothing really like inherently interesting about it, other than like interesting. There's something interesting about this mission other than introducing you to the fact that there's basically dinos on this map basically to fight. And they're not really doing anything interesting to sort of like deal with, so it's a terrible mission to sort of like introduce them, I think. There's like not enough to do here. So Fun Park 2 is basically a mission where like that follows it. And I think at this point we're just gonna go to like the Fun Park missions, like let's go through them quickly. This is sort of recount what they basically are. Alright, so Fun Park 2 is basically very much like, the first like done mission where like, you're basically out to like sort of rescue a GI outpost that's basically in the area. And once you basically rescue that outpost, you have to sort of like, defeat all of the, the critters basically on the map. This one isn't so bad because you're basically still fighting against like, dinos, but they aren't really doing anything interesting as well. The idea basically here is like, you get introduced to like the raptors for the most part, which are a little bit more like predatory and like dangerous than like the other dinosaurs, I guess we'll say. I think I'll say that Fun Park 02 is basically like mediocre because it's not as bad as like the first one, but it could be better. I think it's a better like introduction map to say the least, so we'll give it that. All right, Fun Park 3 and Fun Park 4. Let's see which ones they obviously are. Alright, so in Fun Park 3, there's basically a bunch of dinos basically in the map to sort of flesh out. And you have basically limited forces to basically do so. I'll note that basically in Fun Park 02, you basically have limited forces as well, but you guys just like build what units basically want to like work with. Here you don't have access to like the orcas or the Apaches, and you don't have access to like what type of makeup you basically want to basically fight them with. You have to use what you basically have to have basically to work with here. It's probably a better mission than like Fun Park 2, and it basically like it has you on your edge basically of your seat, trying to figure out what's basically better to like basically take them on with. I'll say it's admirable, I think, but it could have been better for sure. All right, so I'll note that Fun Park 4 basically has you like building up a base, sort of CNC style, and the idea is basically have to sort of like defeat a bunch of like migrating like dinos that are basically gonna be crossing into the area. While you basically have to like defeat all the other like dinos basically are already in the area. Again, it's a very like simple mission, but it does work. You get access to like a nice like amount of like defenses. So you have like the Albus of Life, for example. A really interesting sort of take based in the mission for sure. It probably could have been better with like a little more pizzazz to it, but it wasn't bad, so I'll say it's admirable, I think, this one. Alright, the final mission for Fun Park is basically the one where you can control the dinos themselves. And with the dinos themselves, you're basically looking to kill a not based in the area. Now, in many ways, this is a very interesting mission because you have access to like the full like range of like dinos basically, and you have to sort of figure out how to basically use them, like for the first time. But at the same time, it also shows like how annoying basically the dinos basically are because they don't really like work that well on the attack, I guess, because they're kind of slow and not very like damaging as well. I do like the concept of actually using like the the dials, because you didn't actually like do that like at all in like the Giant Ant campaign, for example, but it could have been better, I think. So I'll say it's honorable, but that's all I'll basically say about it. Alright, so there's my tier list for like the consoles, the covert operation missions, all that jazz basically. It looks fairly balanced, but if you basically remember, I have like all the covert operations like going down here, and then we have like well, if you look at basically, I have like one like of the console missions basically up here, one right there, and then like the console missions are looking at great basically as well down here, for example. Yeah, I really can't say I liked a lot of the missions for like the other missions for like Command and Conquer, but oh well, there's a ranking for it. Let's save her here, and I completely forgot what I basically have for like these lists and stuff like that, but oh well. So CNC. I guess we're not even going to get that as well, so, oh well. There we go. Plays. Oh, what do we basically call us all this stuff here, I guess? So, just not Soviet, Allied. So, covert, up, and console missions. I basically have it? No, I have ranking, so... Yeah, I'll let this one, this like specific tier list was basically done quite a bit after the other ones, because I had to actually play through all the like the missions again, but whatever. Alright, my rankings for the other missions in CNC Tiberium Dawn. So, good enough. Alright, well... Now, I was thinking at this point, by the way, I basically have like, a tier list done for like all the missions basically in the game. I'll probably go through like one more time, basically like, showing off like, what I basically think about all the missions basically is like, a sort of send off here. Both for like regular and for like Command & Conquer. I may also like, show off like, the like other missions as well, but that's good enough for now. So I hope you guys basically enjoyed this like tier list I've basically been doing. And pretty much just take care.